This gorgeous campus on this lake, it was, it was incredible.
That was Northwestern.
Hello and welcome to Chiaspora, the show where we interview those who have left Chicago, but Chicago never left them. Today we have two amazing guests. They're a married couple. They're one of the few married couples that have lasted out here in LA together for many years. We have William Daniels and Bonnie Daniels, Bonnie Bartlett, if you know her from Little House on the Prairie. We have St. Elsewhere. Both of you were on St. Elsewhere.
That's right.
I grew up knowing William or Bill as Mr. Feeny, of course.
Oh, right.
And, of course, also I went to film school, so The Graduate, I knew you from that. Uh-huh. And as you mentioned, you have an autobiography, a memoir, called There I Go Again.
Yes.
Your wife made me read it prior to this interview, basically forcing me.
I apologize.
No. It was one of the best things she did because it's funny. I got a call. This is how the phone call went. Bonnie calls me up. She says, "Hello." I said, "Hello?" She's like, "What do you want?" I said, "What do you mean, what do I want?" She said, you wanted to interview my husband. I said, "Yes. I think, who is this?" She's like, "Oh, you want to interview my husband, William Daniels?" I was like, "Yes." She's like, "Did you read his book?" And I said, "No, I had not." She's like, "Call me back after you read his book." I read it in 2 days, and I loved it. It really was really good. It was nice to get to kind of know you outside of the Feeny graduate world.
Yeah, right.
But it was funny also because there's just I've always been more of a film and TV guy myself. I learned a lot about theater. I mean, I go to theater all the time anyway. My wife loves theater, but it was just interesting to get. I love the behind the scenes of
That's
how.
That's what I wanted you to see.
Yes,
the theater part.
It was amazing, and obviously the reason we're talking to you today about Chicago is that you both went to Northwestern.
That's right.
And you both were in the theater program, and that's where you met. Correct?
Yes.
That's how it all began.
That's right.
Officially, even though I'll do a little bit of preface here, so we don't have to go too far. But I highly recommend people read the book. And before we're done, we should probably hold the book in front of the camera just so people see what to get. You are a child actor. Essentially, your mom, you and your sister were like a dancing duo. You did all your singing and dancing, and then things kind of changed when you went for World War II. Correct?
That's right.
You went overseas.
Yes.
No combat.
No.
Thank God.
Thank God. The way he described it, it was like the easiest trip in the world. But he didn't get to learn any Italian. He didn't do anything like that. But he went.
Yes.
When you came back, though, you went to Chicago to do a visit, from my understanding.
Yes.
Tell the audience a little bit about how you even stepped into Chicago and getting into Northwestern seemed almost like a fluke. It was kind of an interesting story.
Yes. Yes.
So tell us that.
Well.
You went to visit your sister who was doing a play.
Oh, that's right. Was that Carol?
Carol.
Yes. She was doing a play
with
Walter Houston called Apple of His Eye, and she was the apple, and she was terrific in it. And I got back from Italy being drummed out of as a staff sergeant, as a matter of fact. And my father said, "You want to go out to Chicago and see your sister?" I said, "Sure." So we got on a plane, went out, and my mother said, I think there's a school up north here that is one of the schools that was recommended when Howard Lindsay told you to write the government about schools who have good theater departments. And Northwestern was one of them.
Because of the GI Bill. Otherwise, he would never go to college.
He actually came in uniform, from my understanding.
Yes, that's right. And I went there on the GI Bill. And the guy who interviewed me, first of all, I saw this gorgeous campus on this lake, and I thought, oh, wow, this is just beautiful. It was Gothic buildings and so forth. And I went in without an appointment to this interview, and he was rather mediocre about the way the interview was going, until I mentioned that I'd been on Broadway, and then he kind of
he changed his tune.
Yes, he kind of changed his tune, and said to me, "Well, listen, they're doing an exam over there, an entrance exam." Well, as a child performer, my education was rather spotty, you might say. And the idea of going and for an exam was something that I wasn't used to. However, I went there, and I'm sitting there with this pages of yes and no answers, you know, and I'm saying, I don't know, could be yes, could be no.
Is there a maybe option? It's just funny to me. You walk in and automatically go to an entrance exam.
Yes.
That doesn't exist
No.
today. It's
No,
not like
no,
that. You
no,
have
this
to.
could not
There's a
have
list.
happened.
Yes, exactly.
Walks in. He's like, I guess.
Very different today,
No,
as we know.
it's a
Yes.
completely different game. Yeah.
Well, it took me an awful long time to get through this, and I heard a voice above me say, "Are you finished?" And I looked around, and the place was empty. All the other kids had left, and I was still with this. I said, "Well, yeah, I guess all right." And I handed in an unfinished paper, and I got on the train to go back to Chicago. And I thought, "Well, kid, you blew that one." But it turns out, no. They found me acceptable.
But you had to call your school to get the grades.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's a funny story.
Yeah, you kind of like walked, as you say,
Yes.
ass backward into a lot of situations.
Yes, exactly. And this Mr. Lodge, where I went, it was an apartment on 54th Street where kids in show business went. And, you know, I'd go in and sit for a little bit and then say I have an appointment. And I'd go down and read my New York Times at the chock full of nuts. And, you know, forget about that education.
Sure.
So my education was pretty spotty.
But it was the New York
And,
Times. That
yeah.
was your
Yeah.
education.
But
That's not a bad education, I
yeah.
guess.
I got a phone call much later from Mr. Lodge, who ran that school, said to me, "You're going to college?" Like a surprise on his voice. I said, yes. He said, "Well, I have this here asking about your grades and so forth." I said, "Yes, we have to have that." And he said, "Well, you know, we had a fire here." And I said, "Oh, my God." He said, "Yes, all my records were
They're burnt.
burned up, you know." He said, "Do you remember any of your grades?"
Oh, sure, sir.
I think I might. So I was in collusion with him. He knew there was no fire there. He just never kept any grades or records. And so we sort of made up I tried to stay within 90 average.
Sure.
Although I'm sure it was a lot less
Well, you
than
put down
that.
classes that you had never had.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like English. I never had English classes.
Well, no.
Huh?
And history. You never had history.
I never had a history, and here I'm going to play John Adams.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've done a lot of history for a guy who didn't do history.
Yes, exactly.
You might say he's an autodidact.
Right.
Self-taught.
Yeah.
The funniest story that you told me about there was that you went in and you heard about trigonometry. So you said to one of the teachers there, "I want to learn trigonometry." So he didn't know it either.
The
so
teacher didn't know it
The two
either.
of them sat down and tried, well, without any preliminary math.
Just let's get into it, kind of
Let's
thing.
just, so they
We tried to figure it out together.
He couldn't figure it out either, the teacher. I love that.
Who says that? You know, I think
love
today
that.
I'm just going to do trigonometry.
Today I'm gonna do
And
trigonometry.
why not? Let's just figure it out from scratch.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So,
So basically, I'm a fraud when it gets to.
isn't that what an actor is sometimes? Like they play somebody else.
So anyway, I did get into that school.
That was Northwestern.
That was Northwestern.
So for the audience, people who don't know Chicago as much, Northwestern is in Evanston, Illinois. It is right at the border of where Chicago is, and it's on the north side, right along the lake.
Exactly.
The most beautiful campus.
Yes.
I used to go there just on the weekends in high school. They have this really. I've filmed stuff there. They have a rock formation, a really nice rock area in one of the parks along the way. This is so gorgeous. I loved it. I love going by there. I've gone to a lot of football games there. It was just a really nice place.
No,
to
I just
be.
fell in love with it. It was just.
He was in heaven.
He's
He's from Brooklyn.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
like the busiest area, and this is like
and
air-
here's this gorgeous campus on this lake. It was it was incredible.
Well, you learn to be a student.
I'm
He learned, though.
fortunate enough to meet Miss Bartlett here.
I love that. At least in the book, the way you described it is you were listening to auditions, right?
Yeah.
And then some girl comes in, you're like, who's that?
Yes, exactly. That was an actress. And so I waited for her at the door, and I said, how about a cup of coffee? And she said, you're too short. And I said, come on, have a cup of coffee. She said, okay. It was that fast. She'd been following me around the campus, I learned much later.
I followed him around because he'd been on Broadway. And
Yeah, there you go.
My relationship to Chicago is quite different. As a child, I lived in Moline, Illinois.
Yes. Which, by the way, is like right by Iowa-ish. It's not too
Davenport,
far
right
away.
Yeah.
across from Davenport, Iowa. And I had always wanted to be an actress. I wanted to go to. My father said I had to get a scholarship, so I was a very good student, and was valedictorian and all that sort of thing. So anyway, we would go to Chicago because my grandmother lived there and my aunts, and I didn't like Chicago at all.
This is during the summers or during when? When did
No,
you?
just go visit my grandmother.
Gotcha, just whenever you
in
could.
The 30s, and I'm talking about the 30s and 40s, and I did not like it at all. Now, when I go back, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Chicago kind of reinvented itself.
Yes.
And it's just a wonderful place to visit. But Northwestern was always wonderful, even though it got very cold in the winter.
Yes.
Along the water,
Yes.
if you had to walk to a class, oh
yeah, that wind. That wind.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
wind.
But I was used to it because I was from Illinois anyway. But that's how I got that. I only went to Northwestern because my father wouldn't let me go to New York.
He wanted you
I
local.
wanted to go to the neighborhood playhouse. He wouldn't let me go to New York when I was 18.
Well, you showed him after you got married, right? Eventually, you went back.
Right.
You guys lived.
Well, we went
in
through school, and because I was going to go through school in 3 years, I knew how to.
But didn't you both? You both finished in 3.5 or something. You finished
I got-
early.
Yeah, 3. We did 2 summer schools.
She got me through.
And both of your grades, from what I read, you
Yes.
both did really well.
Yes, actually, we did.
He went from a kind of a C+ student to an A+ student.
At one of the best universities in the world.
Because he
Not bad.
He was the courses that we did, no math, no science. Neither one of us would. I could have done the math, but not. I wasn't.
Well, he was doing trigonometry from scratch. So.
Right. But but philosophy, political science,
Sure.
those kind of courses, he was great at, and much better than I because of the New York Times.
Sure.
He knew what was going on in the world much more than I did.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because I was just actressy.
But at so in Northwestern, right? So you were obviously in the theater department together. You saw each other a lot. What did you do? I know you alluded a little bit to what you did on the outside. What did you do in your free time? Did you go into the city?
We went in to see certain plays.
Yes.
We saw Death of a Salesman
Nice.
in Chicago. We saw Streetcar Named Desire in Chicago.
Was
I
it
saw
the Goodman? Do you know what
ballet.
theater?
We didn't go to the Goodman. No.
Gosh.
And it was right before all of the wonderful comedic stuff started to happen there.
Sure.
So we never knew Viola Spolin or Paul Sills. We never knew them. We later, Bill worked with Barbara Harris,
Sure.
who was Paul Sills' wife, and a great comedian. But that all came a little, Mike Nichols, that all came a little after we had left. So we didn't get to.
Enjoy all that. I understand. But I know you did at least. I remember you saying something about Howard Street, and you would listen. You would go and listen to jazz bands. Is
My
that
brother,
correct?
my brother took us.
Is this
to-
the Howard that near where I live? Like, is this
Yes.
on the border? I had
Yes.
no
Yes.
idea
Howard
because
Street.
there are some big names that apparently played on
yeah.
the.
Well, Evanston was dry. You couldn't get a drink. Howard Street, you'd go to get a beer.
That's where all the kids would go down there to drink and go to the clubs.
What clubs were there at that
I
time?
don't know. I
We
didn't.
don't
Oh,
know the
yeah.
names of the clubs, but we saw
Actually,
Nat King Cole. No, I saw him in Davenport.
oh, you did.
My brother arranged for him to come there, and he had to find a place for him to stay.
Nice.
Because I remember going into that venue,
Sure.
and my brother, we went up to Nat King Cole. He was very young, and Bill and my brother said, "Are you okay? Is it okay there?" And he said, yeah, it's fine, because my brother had to find him a place to stay. No hotel would take him.
Wow. Well,
None of the hotels
it was a
would
different
take him.
time, obviously.
And the very famous singer that we met there, you know, the one with the Billie Holiday. That's who I'm
Holiday.
Billie Holiday.
We
You
met
saw
her
Billie
there.
Holiday.
My brother
yeah.
introduced her to us.
Wow.
So he knew, he was fascinated by all those jazz singers.
He was an interesting character.
But we met,
He
that's,
really was.
and he would come
Right
to-
out of Scott Fitzgerald,
Yeah.
he was.
But it was, she was fascinating.
Wow.
Wonderful, wonderful singer.
You've met a lot of people through the years, which is kind of remarkable. It's funny because I'm reading through the book and I'm going, who didn't you know? Like that's how I felt. I mean, one point you were. This is after Chicago. You went to New York and you were working in New York for a little bit, mostly theater stuff. And then you started actually getting television stuff before he started getting television stuff.
I got my
yeah.
first big job. Yeah.
And tell everybody what job that
I
was.
was the lead on a soap opera
And
called
you-
Love of Life. So I started making money. But I had always made money before. He didn't have to do anything. I would work as a secretary. I would work in the department
Sure.
stores. I essentially support. He would once a year he'd get a show for $500. You know, and that was his income. And he was a lost soul for a while. He really was. He didn't know what to do.
You started kind of bouncing around. Like you would have a role, and then he would kind of have a pretty big role for a little bit, and then there'd be a lull in there somewhere. And
And he didn't know how to be active.
but it was just interesting. Like you're like, oh, I'm friends with Gene Wilder. I'm like, you were?
They were very close friends.
But how funny is that? Like no one talks about that.
No.
That's
Yeah.
really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they
you
were
knew
very
Gene?
close.
Gene and I were close, and we played bridge. And
We played a lot
And
of
we
bridge.
knew him
His
with
first,
his first wife.
who wrote a wonderful play.
yeah.
Mary Mercier was her
Yeah.
name. Funny lady. Bill directed something at the studio with Gene and Mary called The Office.
There were a lot of times where it seemed that fate was going to go a different way. You would say no to things a
Yeah.
lot.
A lot.
And then all of a sudden, someone said, you should probably do this. Or she would say, you should probably. And then all of a sudden, okay, I'll do it. And then it becomes like the biggest thing in the world. It's just that kind of weird luck.
Well, it was built in my genes because I was put in the business by a mother and never felt that I would have chosen that. If it had been myself, I would have been a doctor or something. Until I realized that this is something I'm really good at. And then I stopped that line of reasoning and started to take it seriously and started to take Lee Strasberg seriously.
Well, he was kind of a tennis anyone, you know, in the play that he did. It was like the old theater. And when we got to New York, the new kind of theater was coming in. Brando was there.
Right.
Yeah.
All Cassavetes was doing movies out here. It was a whole different time. And all of a sudden, I mean, Bill did not fit into that at all.
No.
But at Northwestern, I must say, Miss Krause just said, "You're a character actor," because he was young and pretty. He was pretty, and she said, "No."
Pretty?
Just
Yeah,
take
you
it.
were pretty.
Just
You
take
were.
it.
And she said, "No. You're a character actor," and she started giving him older. Well, when he started working with Lee, then Milton Katselas saw him in the class, and when it came time to do the Zoo Story, Edward Albee's first play, Milton called Bill in to read, and of course Bill thought he was reading for the
lead.
which is, you know, Jerry.
Did all the talking.
They did all the time.
The guy on the bench just sat
And
there.
so he was
That's the way I looked at it.
And he was an older conservative man. So
I didn't realize the importance of the guy sitting on the bench, because the guy sitting on the bench is the person that the audience identified with, not this guy who did all this talking, this strange person. And so it really was an important part. But I didn't know that for the longest time, you know.
no, but it was anyway. Milton knew, and Bill went in and read, and then Milton said, "Now, would you read the other part for us?"
The guy on the bench.
And he did. He knew. He knew he was gone.
I said the first line, they laughed, and I thought, oh, Christ, they're going to offer me this
Right.
and not the other part.
But he started getting these character parts.
Right.
Yes.
Then he began to work. Then he started getting a lot of character parts, like 1,000 Clowns. He was wonderful.
But Tennessee Williams at one point
Yes.
handpicked you for something.
Well, he approved of him. Yes. That was a major thing for Bill. Because that was a role that Ben Gazzara had
Yes.
played. And the director, this was for a tour, and the director,
He had
Didn't
hired
see Bill.
somebody else,
who was looked like a halfback.
you know. But that person had to be okayed by Tennessee and
Audrey.
Audrey,
His
yes,
agent.
Audrey Wood.
Audrey Wood.
And they said no to him. So they called all the people back, including me, who had been rejected by the director. And Tennessee picked me. And then it was important for me because this director and I didn't see eye to eye, so I knew to say yes to him and then do my own thing because he was wrong. And sometimes directors are wrong, and you got to listen to your own voice.
That is something you say a lot in your memoir. And the funny thing is, what I never understood is after you decide to go your own way,
Yeah.
the director just kind of lets you go.
Oh yeah.
They
He
don't
acted.
know.
They don't
don't
know.
even know the
They-
difference.
They just have this idea in their head, whatever
That's
it's going
right.
to be.
That's right. What I learned was don't fight with him.
It's not worth it.
You know, it's not worth it. Just
Yeah.
say, right, yeah, you got it, and then do my own thing. And he thinks that's what he was saying, and he wasn't. It was my
They're very
idea,
insecure.
you know.
Directors are very
Well-
Yeah, they don't know what they want half the time
Well-
until they see it.
They just don't want to fail.
Yeah.
And you have to
Yes.
know, you have to want to fail. You have to not be afraid of failing.
Yep.
And directors are so afraid to fail.
It's, you know, from my perspective, it's not always just about fail. It's like this. You're running, I mean, and by the way, it totally depends if it's television or film, but let's just say it's film, okay? You're running an entire production. Everybody's relying on you, and everyone's asking you a bunch of questions, and really you think that you're
right.
supposed to have all the answers, whether you
right.
do or you don't.
Yeah.
At least what I've learned is that everyone there, if you just kind of let them do what they do best, you're going to have the best product. You can take the credit later.
Yes, that's right.
But the idea is it's kind of, other than maybe the framing of the shot or kind of a little bit of the blocking, but for the most
Don't
part,
impose your own idea. Let them do
Let
what they
people
do.
do what they
That's
do.
the reason you hired them.
that is
To do
correct.
their job. And you do have, I think the director has to have
You have to have a vision for the
A
whole
vision,
thing.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
A
But
vision.
once, like you said, but once you hire the person that you're supposed to, who's supposed to be the lead or whatever it is, let them do what they
Yes,
do.
exactly.
It really is a collaboration of every single person working together. The Emmys, the Oscars, which, by the way, you have won Emmys in the same
won,
year.
Mm-hmm.
Second time ever, I think that's what you
Yes.
said in the history of time, that a couple won the same year, same show. But it's one of those things where when you hand out awards, really, the reason these people have to thank everybody, there are so many people involved.
Yeah.
There
Hey,
are.
do you watch them, though? Do you still watch
I
them?
watch them. I watch them
Do you?
because I'm a kid from Moline. I mean, you know.
Right. It's
I mean,
still that aspirational
I
thing.
still have. I was a fan. I was a chased actors around in Moline. If anybody famous came, I chased them around.
Well, you
town.
you landed one at Northwestern.
Yeah, and I landed one. That's true. But they have to do it for business.
Of course, well,
They have to
of course,
do it.
and
They do.
of course, it's, if nothing else, if you have somebody who's won from your production, that means something went well
That's
in that
right.
production.
That's
So that's what I'm saying. For St. Elsewhere, when you both won,
Yes.
clearly they cast it well,
Yeah, yes,
right?
absolutely.
Right.
I think Bruce, the producer of St. Elmo's, I mean, he and the other producers, the Tinkers and Tom, they had wonderful taste.
Yeah.
They brought in such good actors, and they used Howie Mandel to act, and he didn't even think he was an actor, and he was wonderful.
Yeah, no,
He's wonderful.
people don't know him as that. People think he's like a game show host.
Yeah.
No, he's
was a very good
very good
actor.
actor.
Yeah, we would like to have seen him go on,
Yes.
but
Yes.
he made a good choice for himself to go the
Sure,
way
sure.
he did. Went.
Over the years, you've done a lot of projects, obviously, for both of
Yeah.
you. Audrey Hepburn is somebody you also work with. Wasn't that your big film role to start off?
Two for the road.
Two for the Road.
Well, he came and did The Graduate. He did a series called Captain Nice. But before that, he was doing a musical with Barbara Harris. On a clear day, you can see forever. And he got a telegram. His agent got a telegram. They wanted him to do Two for the Road
Right.
with Audrey Hepburn.
Right.
They wanted Barbara too, but she didn't want to do it because she was doing a lead in the musical. And he was supporting her. And so he said, well, I'm going. And so
I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. So he went to Paris, and then Captain Nice and The Graduate were all right in between in there. All of that.
All of it happened.
Like you'd do a pilot, and then you'd go to Europe, do the film, and while you're there, they say, "Hey, the pilot's picked up," so you go back.
Right.
See
It's
what
always like that. It's always also probably the most inconvenient time. You're like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and then you have to jump onto the other.
Yeah.
When
But he
did
had a wonderful run there. Oh my God, that was great.
did when you guys moved out to Hollywood? Did you have a gig for yourself when you first moved out here yourself, or it was just you came here for Captain Nice, and then what was the next thing that you landed?
I stopped acting for almost 10 years to
Wow.
take
The
Ray's
kids.
voice.
The kids.
And Bill wanted to come out here. He just didn't want to work in the theater anymore. He wanted to live a normal life. So we came out here.
And you had one, which is, by the way, remarkable. You had long-lasting careers in Hollywood with almost 9 to 5s, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
But when you wanted to have kids was very interesting to me. It was
Yeah.
very telling because you adopted. So you took 10 years.
Yeah.
You basically were here. You had Captain Nice for a minute. You landed a couple movie roles. I actually really like the stories that you mentioned specifically about The Graduate. Tell me how that role even came about.
Mike wanted him to do a smaller role of the clerk that Buck Henry ended up doing. Very funny scene. And Bill
Yes, it
said,
was, right. It was just a scene behind a desk in a hotel.
Too small. It's too small. He said, I don't want to do
Another
that.
another role he says no to.
Yes,
He
absolutely.
said, no, Mike, it's too small, and you don't realize I've done this, I've done that. Mike said, wait a minute, I know everything you've done. And Mike started quoting
Yes.
lines from plays Bill had done. And he said, I know what you've done. Okay, how about playing one of the fathers?
I said, well, wait a minute. I'll have to go back and look at that. And that was a much bigger role. So I said, sure, that'd be fine. Oh, it's funny.
Mike Nichols had an interesting way of casting.
Well, yes, he did. He just,
And fiery.
he usually leaned toward New York actors, which we were.
Yeah,
And,
all of you.
And, if he saw what he wanted, it doesn't matter. He'll hire them whether the studio wants them or not, which is what happened with Dustin. The studio didn't want Dustin. They wanted Robert Redford or somebody like that. And he said, no, I want this kid from Off-Broadway named Dustin Hoffman. That's who I want. And they said, okay, because they wanted Mike Nichols. So he got to say, and of course it made Dustin a big star.
It's funny. I wonder if that would have happened today. I feel like studios have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm sure they have.
I feel like if they'd rather have the actor than they would have the director.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it depends on how you look at it. But that's something I've always noticed.
Yeah.
With ever-changing times
Yeah.
is that studios are more. Because of social media,
Mike
the big
was
stars
lucky.
are the.
He was lucky. He got what he wanted.
And he helped a man's career. Look
yeah.
at Dustin Hoffman now.
Exactly.
It's a very interesting
But
thing.
he's an extraordinary actor. I don't see him anymore, but so I guess he's not doing a whole lot now. But Dustin's done some great movies and great character roles.
Yeah,
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Do you ever keep in touch with these people?
Not Dustin, no.
No.
Some people we did with Gene for a long time, and then
With Gene Wilder, yeah.
we see Ed Begley a lot.
Nice.
We love Ed, and he lives close by.
Nice. So, it's just kind of funny because what people don't also understand is when you're on these sets, if you're not an actor, it becomes like family for a little bit, like
For a little bit.
for that
A
short
little
time.
Absolutely.
And then sometimes it's kind of like any other job. You move on to another
Yeah, and then,
thing, and then but once in a while you still make phone calls or you see them at a party or something like that,
Yeah.
and you reminisce on that stuff. It's just
Well, Bill still sees a lot of the people that he worked with in the Screen Actors Guild when he was the president.
so that was, by the way, I knew nothing about that. It was a short term, but you did something very important during that term.
Yes.
We should talk about that. You were the president of the Screen Actors
Yeah,
Guild.
but it was a tumultuous 2-year term, and although they wanted me to do a second term, I said no, I've had enough, because I was the head of the guild, and we had a commercial strike of about 6 months, which was very demanding, back and forth to New York, back and forth with the producers, until we got luckily, what we were asking for, and it was a good contract finally, but it was a tumultuous time.
Painful period. It's painful. A strike is painful.
Yeah.
Let's talk some context. So first of all, again, for people who don't even know what the Guild is, it's a union. It's a bunch of actors. We're talking people who do theatrical. We're talking about people who do TV. Talking about people who also do just regular
radio.
theater, radio, and just everything, voiceover, and everything. You have New York. You have LA, and
That's what complicates it.
correct. And from how it usually works with these things is that money is not filtering to the actors, and then all of a sudden, basically, there's a strike. People who are doing commercials, they were trying to throw royalties out.
Yeah, the residuals.
The residuals, residuals. And so what happens? They came to you,
Yes.
and they said, "Can you speak on our behalf?" Correct?
They asked him to. It was commercial actors that asked him to run to be the president, and he foolishly said yes.
But the funny thing is, you knew nothing at
Nothing.
all about this.
He's the worst politician in the world because he'll say things.
But they were so needful, sitting there at
actors,
at the
and
delicatessen.
he'd just come off 2 big series, had made a lot of money, and he felt terrible.
What
for
year
them.
was this? What year was this? Do you remember?
2000, somewhere around in there, around 2000 somewhere.
You did succeed, and you helped these people
He
out.
did.
Residuals
They will
were-
still put out lies.
So the factions, again, as for context,
That's
the
right.
factions is interesting is that you ousted a former president.
Very
That's true.
popular guy.
Yeah.
And when you oust somebody, clearly there are factions that grow
You
within.
have enemies.
Yes.
Correct. And when that
People
started,
I'd never even met.
right,
We're
right.
his enemies.
And they started trying to work against you and so
Yes.
on and so forth. You were trying your best to for their purposes.
I know.
A lot of people should have you to think. Put it that way.
He essentially made a lot of money for a lot of people.
Which is what a blessing.
Yeah.
You guys have both played a lot of character roles, right? So, probably people who watch shows in the 80s will know you from St. Elsewhere as a doctor. It transformed into, you get into another role and people will go, hey, I remember you from this and that.
Yeah.
I did watch 1776. You played John Adams.
Yes.
Funny enough, eventually you played John Quincy Adams as well in a
Yes.
different thing. Everybody, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I watched that movie in high school. I don't think Hamilton might have happened. Have you ever spoken to...
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Lin-Manuel.
John Adams.
No, yes. Has he ever said you were an inspiration, that movie was an
Yes.
inspiration?
And Mr. Feeny.
Really?
Yes.
So,
He said, Mr.
He got on the phone with me. He said, "Hi, Mr. Feeny."
Oh, yeah.
1776, very amazing film, amazing play. I really do love the story about Kit, specifically about Knight Rider. You should tell the joke about the person who you met at like a convention who asked
yeah.
who asked where you were.
Yeah.
Tell that story. That was so good.
Well,
That was in London.
that was in London. A well-dressed man, and I was signing autographs, and he came up and he said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." I was signing my autograph. He said, "Well, when you were the voice of the car, where were you?"
Just where were you in the shot?
Yes, I said, "You mean under the hood or in the trunk?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "No, I'm sorry. I was in a studio."
You should have played that up.
I know.
You should have given that guy.
Yeah. Oh, I was in the trunk and it was hot in there.
Yeah, if it sounded muffled that day, it's because I was sweating really hard.
He
was so disappointed.
I mean, the audience sometimes alarms
don't
me
wanna
at that
know that.
naivete, you know. I mean,
But he didn't want to know that he was in a studio.
But isn't that cute? Like in this really weird, horrible way. I'm kind of like thinking, man, it's so cute how people really don't know all the little secrets.
Yes.
And it's not even a big, I mean, it's not a little secret.
absolutely.
But it's just funny.
Almost anybody would know.
He cares so much about that car, and so like, he thinks you're
I know.
crouched behind.
I know. Well, I thought it was peculiar anyway. I was just, doing a favor to the producer and.
But the joke was he wanted you to do like a robot voice.
Yes.
Yes.
And you did the same thing. Oh, okay. And then you just did your own thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, I said no. And he said, "How about Ma Bell?" I said, "Would you just let me read it, please?" With my own voice. And so I did.
And that's why it works.
Yes.
Because it's a character.
Because
Right.
you can't do a character,
can't do a
robot and sound all the variations that you need to use. even as a car, so,
It's funny.
yeah.
I think, though, you think about it. We have Siri on our phones now.
Yeah.
It's not a robot voice. I always wonder if, you know how life imitates art and vice versa? I can't imagine that someone didn't think, maybe we should just have a real voice for this.
Yeah.
Kind of
No,
like
they
Kit.
didn't. They
Kinda
didn't.
like Kit.
Didn't do that.
Well, he's saying maybe they did.
I'm,
with
so-
Siri.
I'm wondering.
maybe, yes.
I'm wondering if it was an influence. It's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Possible.
The one thing I knew you from, I grew up, you basically teaching me. I'm in Chicago. I'm eating deep dish pizza in my friend's house right across the street, watching what they called TGIF. It was Thank God It's Friday or whatever
Yes,
thing it is. It's
TGIF.
Friday. And that's what I watched for years. I watched the Graduate stuff later. I was like, wait, Feeny was young? Feeny, or 1776, like, Feeny can sing and dance? No, I thought he was like a half British guy or whatever he was doing.
Even the kids thought he was British.
Of course. And you guys got married on screen
Yeah, we did.
as you were Dean Bolander. Those cast members, do you guys still talk?
Yeah, we see them.
Oh, yeah.
I see you go to
because
conventions.
We've done
You do
conventions
conventions
with
and
them.
stuff
Yes.
like that.
We've enjoyed that.
We just saw
Bill's
them
enjoyed
not too long ago in Boston.
Boston.
So I was looking at all the people I'd want to be on this interview thing. I'm like, Betsy Randall, I don't know if you know, she's from Chicago. Ben Savage, he's from Chicago.
Yes.
Fred Savage, I think he made a couple cameos, obviously the brother. And then you guys had Chicago connections. Why didn't they just have the darn thing in Chicago? Everybody's from there anyway.
Right. Funny.
It was a funny show, and it actually got funnier, I would say, over the years, And you played a huge part in that. I remember the one time that Bill mentioned that you yelled at everybody.
Well,
Settle down.
they're 13,
kids.
15 years old. I used to stay in my dressing room because they didn't take this thing we were doing as seriously as I did. They just joked around, and if they messed
love
up,
making mistakes.
So I'd only come out when I was ready to shoot. A couple of times they messed up, and I just yelled at them,
They were.
You're a professional actor from New
And
York.
they were startled that I did that. And then, of course, I smiled and said,
But the thing is, it wasn't very serious.
No, I believe you winked at Michael Jacobs afterward. You were like, yeah. Just trying to wake these kids up a little bit.
No, but the thing is, he's an interesting person. Watch the show and everything. I said, Billy, can't you, because Michael is a very good director. But I said, can't you kind of help them, to be a little better and more real? Something. He said, He said, I don't tell them what to do. They are my peers. When we are working, they are my peers. I don't want them to tell me what to do, and I don't want to tell them what to do.
When you talk to them now, the kids, do they ever say, you really helped me through becoming an actor or anything like that? No.
Oh, well, you know who does? Will does say that. Will said that.
He plays Eric, the older
Eric, yeah.
brother. On
He
the
has
show.
said at conventions, he said, I didn't learn from Billy, but I don't know how he put it, but he said, I learned the discipline of being an actor from Mr. Daniels. He said, from just watching him the way he was, I did learn a lot, mostly about how to be an actor, how to be the discipline of it, because, see, Bill learned his early discipline on the stage.
Yes. Well,
where
he had to
you
almost.
are totally required to be disciplined.
That's right.
You see, you can't, you don't mess around. A child actor.
Otherwise, mom gets mad. Those are, by the way, some crazy stories. What you said about your mom early on is.
It was abusive.
When you're 13 years old, you don't know that you are being actually abused by putting you into a situation where there is a lot of tension to perform.
Sure.
And it leaves its mark on you. It really does. And my sisters, who were very talented, got out as soon as they could. And even though that Jackie played Ada Wanny in Oklahoma and all of that, they got out as soon as they could. And of course, I was stuck with them. I didn't have anything else. They could get married or something like that.
You got married too.
I got married.
How long have you been married now, by the way?
68 years, I think.
Yeah.
That's a few years.
Yeah, that's a few years.
I know one time I was doing a commercial. I was cast, and they were bringing in kids, to see who would go well with me.
Sure.
It was for commercial in New York. And a little boy who they really wanted, who was just the darling little Irish freckled kid, it just looked great. And they brought him in, and they said, "Now do this," and he'd say, "Mm-mm." And they said, "Bonnie," I thought, "Yeah, I'll get him to do it." "Oh, honey, just do this and do this," and he said, "Mm-mm." And he did that about 3 times, and finally they let him go. And we all said, "Oh, thank God his mother wasn't here; she'd kill him." And I went home and I told Bill that, and he said, "Why didn't I have the guts
To stand up like that.
to do that?" He thought that boy was terrific because he's not going to get jobs, and then his mother will give up because he didn't want to be there.
Do you think that you became happy with acting because you knew you were good at it? Because, people say if you're really good at something, of course you start liking it more because...
Yes, that's exactly what happened. I started, I don't know, getting recognition, getting some awards off
Zoo
Broadway.
Story. Zoo Story started it.
And Zoo Story. And I realized that it really is a very respectable way of making a living, and you seem to be good at it. So stop questioning it. Stop saying no. That sort of thing.
But when he makes a mistake, it is so painful.
Oh, yeah.
It is
Yeah.
not allowed in his, it's because of his mother.
Yeah.
And when he goes through hell. If I do a bad performance, I think, okay, let's do better next time. Okay.
It's a perfectionist in him at this
Oh.
point.
Miserable.
Is it like that with everything, or is it just with acting?
I don't know. How do I answer that?
Yeah, pretty much. No, tennis. He loved tennis. But he could lose. No, he wasn't. He just loved it.
Gotcha.
It wasn't that painful. But for him, acting, if he forgot a lyric or something,
Yeah.
it wasn't like, what do you want from me? It wasn't none of that at all.
Yeah.
It was like he'd go into the bathroom and close the door and not come out.
Gotcha.
Very painful. He went through a lot of painful years.
Do you want to continue doing acting stuff on the side? Are you doing more acting, or are you at this point you're relaxed and you've done your share? Or where are you
Well,
at?
no, I just, if I'm not going to go audition or do any of that stuff, interviews and all of that. If they want me for something, they ask for Bill, and I'll look at the material. And
He still does a lot of voice. He does Kit a lot.
Oh yeah, really? Still?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And if they have to pay him.
Well,
Bill won't do anything.
No.
no, understood. But in other words, you're still active. I know you still go to the conventions and things
Yeah,
like that.
sure.
But in terms of if somebody called you up right now and said, "I have a role for you," you'd consider it.
I'd want to see the material, and then I'd want to know the money, and
Right.
if everything was okay.
It makes sense. It makes. Well, how about yourself? No.
The same, except that I won't. I'm fussy.
Understood.
I just turned down something last week because I thought it was immoral.
I see.
I just thought, no, that's not right. That's not a horror film. That's a murder.
Do you travel a lot? Both of
We
you?
used to. We used to. When we were young. No, I wasn't. I'm from Moline.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
wasn't interested. I just wanted to work.
Right.
But then later on, and my friends all traveled.
Right.
All our friends traveled so much in New York and from Northwest, and then we started traveling, and I love it. We've
Yes.
gone to Greece and Ireland and lots of places we haven't gone.
Yes.
Well, we have friends who go everywhere.
Yeah. Did anyone ever notice you overseas? Does that ever happen?
Oh yeah.
I
We're in
found in
Greece.
Greece a bartender in a little place. So I was talking English to him because he understood it. And from the doorway, I hear this voice, Kit, I got you upstairs. You come up north, everything free for you. I have the car with the lights on the front. I thought, oh my God, this guy's crazy.
He really did. He wanted to take Bill
Yeah, come
to
up
Italy.
north. Everything's free for you.
Wow.
But yeah,
There are perks of being an actor.
he gets a lot of mail though, of Mr. Feeny mail and stuff and 1776. He gets a lot of it's from Germany and all over.
Yeah.
And I get it from Little House.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Do they when they send mail, for example, if you get it from overseas, did they syndicate it overseas and translate and dub it over? Any of these shows? Do you know? Like, is there Boy Meets
sure.
World Germany?
I'm sure. Oh yeah.
Have you ever heard about that?
Well, I'm sure. How would we get the mail?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Maybe they're expats. I don't know. Or you're saying that they probably did a full translation.
I think so. Certainly all the movies do. Certainly Little House.
Sure,
does.
sure. Well,
Little House is all over the world.
Graduate too, I'm sure. And
Graduate,
sure.
I'm not sure about Boy Meets World, frankly. I'm not sure. But, we know how lucky we've been. Right, Bill?
Absolutely.
We've been very lucky in
Yeah.
our life. And, I mean, overall, it's been very lucky. We've been blessed.
Yeah.
The fact that you've been
Because
married.
it's been a very long career, to have worked for such a length of time. We're very fortunate. I feel very lucky about it.
Well, he always said, I just don't. It's interesting because my mother didn't want me to marry an actor, and my mother was terrified.
Sorry, Mom.
Terrified that I would end up an old lady wandering around the streets of New York saying, "Oh, there's my director," and with no money, putting her hair.
Well, I didn't have a nickel when I
Right.
met her. And
But he always said too. He said, "I don't want to be old and poor." That was his. He was terrified of being old.
her mother
Poor.
didn't want her to marry me.
Not at
but
all.
then when I made money,
Oh, of course. Marry him now.
and Bill, I love you.
No, she really didn't. Know.
I thought, oh,
Yeah, thank you.
Carrie.
But I have now written a book, and it's complete. I haven't settled on where it's going to be published, if it'll be there or not.
When is that going to be out? When can people see that?
Oh well, I don't know. I hope for the spring, maybe. By the
Okay.
spring, maybe.
Congratulations on that. And then There I Go Again is Bill's book.
That's Bill's book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend people read that. It is a really good read. So thank you very much for joining us on Chiaspora, and we wish you the
Okay.
best of luck.
Good.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.